It's been too cold to do much of anything around here lately, but today, finally, it was warm enough where I could at least open the doors and clean out the shop. And so I took advantage of that opportunity and really dusted in some nooks and crannies. And I used this mobile dust collection cart that I built a few years back now to do that. I had always intended to make a video about this cart, and I figured now would be a good time to do that since I recently performed some maintenance on it and fixed it up and added a spot for the spindle sander. So this video, I'll go through the components of this cart. I will walk you through how I use it, and then I will perform a sound check to see how well it actually contains the sound from the Shop Vac. So this cart actually started out as a drill press stand. I built the carcass here to house my drill press, and then when I built a cabinet, I moved the drill press over there and decided to convert this into a mobile dust collection cart. So I added this platform here, and I pocket screwed it to this carcass and built some bracing. This setup basically has three parts. You have the dust collection bucket attached to a hose. I think that's a 2.5-inch hose. From that, the air moves to the Shop Vac. This is an old Shop Vac I had kicking around inside of a enclosure with sound dampening foam lining it. There are some vent holes on the bottom and on the top, and there is this box fan to the back of which I have strapped a 20 by 20 by 1 filter. So when I turn this machine on, I have the fan and I have the Shop Vac and also the spindle sander all plugged in the same outlet. So when I turn it on, the Shop Vac, which is always on, activates, and I can use the system and everything runs pretty smoothly. So I will go through each one of the three components one by one in a little more detail. So the first part is the dust collection bucket. This is just a basic 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot and lid. And starting with the bucket, first thing that I did was cut out a hole in the side, and I attached a piece of hard plastic Shop Vac hose attachment, something or other, to it. I just used epoxy, the strongest I could find, and liquid nail. I was a little bit worried that that would last me all of a week before it fell apart, but it actually lasted about 2 years, maybe a little bit more, before it started to separate on this side. So I just recently got done taking it apart and refined it a bit. I took a file, opened this opening up a little bit more. I abraded the outside here of the bucket for better adhesion for the epoxy and the liquid nail. And it is surprisingly solid. This looks like a complete hack job, and it is, but at the end of the day, the hose stays put and doesn't go anywhere, and that's really all that I'm looking for here. To the hose, I just to the plastic, I just essentially taped on 2.5-inch hose, and that duct tape has pretty much lasted me the 2 years before I had to replace it. Inside the bucket, I have a Thein baffle setup, Thein. If you are unfamiliar with how this works, the debris is brought in through this hole, it circulates around the bucket, and the heavier pieces fall through the bottom through these little spaces here. And the only thing that continues on to the Shop Vac is the finer dust. One thing that sets mine apart, and looking at a lot of Thein baffle setups, I thought they'd be pretty difficult to empty, especially if something big and fat got caught or fell down the slots. So I decided to make mine have a flip top. So I took the baffle itself, I cut right down the middle, and I attached the two pieces with piano hinge, sometimes called continuous hinge. And whenever I want to empty it, I just flip it out of the way, dump the shit that's in the bottom, and then flip it back. Sometimes I've noticed this piece gets flipped up. Not very often, but sometimes. If that becomes a problem for me, I'll just attach some sort of heavy counterweight here on the bottom, and that should prevent that from happening. As you can see in the bottom, there's a fair amount of heavier debris and stuff, so it works pretty well. It is attached to the bucket itself with just, I think, liquid nail and 3 screws. And that has not moved really at all in about 2 years now. So that's the bucket setup. Like I said, lasted surprisingly long amount of time. And with some basic maintenance, it seals pretty well. There's no leak, nothing like that. So I'm happy with how that turned out. To that, I attached this lid. Nothing fancy here. This is just a little piece of elbow PVC pipe. I cut a little bit of a hole, just smaller than the PVC, and pushed it in so it's a tighter fit. And to that, I liquid nailed and then caulked around. And the bottom is pretty much the same. And that never failed in the 2 years I had it, but I decided to take it apart and reapply it just to be safe, since I did it to that part as well. Here I have another piece of, I don't know, some Shop Vac attachment I had lying around. It wasn't big enough, so I wrapped a boatload of duct tape around it and got a nice fit there, a bit of a squeeze fit. That works very well. I don't have any leak coming through, coming out of the top, and I have a little hole just about the size of the plastic piece of Shop Vac going into the carcass, and around that I put a sound dampening piece of foam, and I don't notice any problems with this. Been about a year and a half since I put that on. I believe, used spray adhesive. Yeah, it was spray adhesive, and it hasn't peeled off or anything, so been impressed with that. So that's the outside setup. So the inside originally was just wide open space. My drill press sat on top, there was no door, and this was all wide open and essentially storage. So when I converted this to a dust collection cart, I kind of had a spot all ready to go, which was nice. So the first thing that I did was bought a bunch of this sound dampening foam. It's not super cheap. I think it might have been like 20 bucks for 12 by 12 squares of it. And I needed at least 2 of those to do this. So that wasn't the cheapest, but it works surprisingly well. Easy to attach. I used spray adhesive and just pressure. You can see some of the parts are starting to peel off. I'll just have to hit that with more spray adhesive and it should be fine. And then I just kind of plugged in where I could. And on the inside, kind of dark, but everywhere but the top has this sound dampening foam. So the back wall, the side walls, and the bottom. On the bottom, I drilled one and actually another hole, which you can't see, for venting. Very important that you vent a Shop Vac setup like this, because the heat that's escaping the Shop Vac needs somewhere to go. The easiest thing is to drill holes in the top, and I did that as well. But I decided to drill a hole in the bottom to sort of get a natural, I guess, convection. So as the heat rises, cooler air will get sucked up through, and it will go probably this way. And my thinking is it'll pass through the motor and maybe cool it off a little bit. The only problem with that is the more holes you drill, the more negative effect it has on sound dampening. So if you drill a dozen holes, you might be defeating the purpose of containing the sound here. So I have the one, I have another, I forget where, and then I have some up here, which you can kind of tell for venting, and a few, you can't really see them, but a few up top. I had to fashion a door of some sort, and this was probably the biggest challenge. So you need a door, but you need it to seal properly. So I thought, what's the best way to make a door seal? And at the time, the only thing I could think of was a series of latches, 3 of them. So I pushed the door shut, and I have 3 latches. One at the top, it's hard to do with one hand. I have one in the middle, and then one on the bottom. And that provides enough pressure to keep the door closed enough to help reduce sound. So that was my original setup. Since then, someone told me it might have been a good idea to use a latch. Essentially, you attach a latch maybe here on the side, and you have the latch hook here. And so you latch it on and then pull the latch shut, and that kind of presses it all together. That's probably a prettier option. This has not needed to be replaced once in 2 years. It is a bit of a hassle to open 3 of those things, and sometimes hard to push the door shut while you're trying to shut the latch, but not that big of a deal. So when I need to open it, I just have to go 1, 2, and 3, and it pops open. So pop this open and take a look inside. The first thing you'll notice is that the filter is dirty. That's actually not that bad of a thing. If we look closer, it is got some bigger particles, which is disappointing. So I might need to check my baffle setup. If you look at the bottom, there's not a lot of heavy matter there whatsoever. So the baffle does a pretty good job of separating the heavy stuff, which falls into the bucket, leaving just the finer stuff for here. If you didn't have a separator system, the heavy stuff would do what it's kind of doing here, but on a much larger scale. It would really fill up your filter, it would clog it, and you'd have to clean it out over and over and over again. And last we have this box fan. Nothing fancy. I think I got this for $10 or so at Walmart. It's the basic Lasco box fan. What's nice about these fans is that they fit a 20 by 20 by 1 air filter pretty well. And these are the type of filters that I use in my home. And I switch them out at least once a month in my HVAC system. And when I switch them out, I put them here, or like I just switched this one out up there for my other fan filter system. So I get sort of double use. And the fact that I'm putting a used filter on the back of these things isn't the worst thing in the world. If anything, it actually helps, because the more, I guess, clogged or caked this thing gets, the better it is at trapping particulates. If it was brand new, a lot of finer dust would just keep on going through and going through. But the more caked on dust you have, the better it actually is at trapping that fine dust, which is, again, the most harmful type of dust you can be inhaling. So capturing that is actually pretty important. This was kind of a experiment gone wrong with then right. So if you can see, I attach it with some pieces of tire inner tube. I cut it down the middle and cut some strips and attached it to 2 screws that I sunk in. If you're going to do this, please make sure that these tire tubes are loose. I actually had them very tight because I thought they needed to be tight to keep the filter on. The problem that creates is it bends on this soft cardboard, and it sometimes will create an opening there or an opening there for air to get in. When this thing is turned on, the air coming through this way does a perfect job of keeping the filter to the fan. So you can see there's a ton of slack here. That's just preventing the filter from falling over. That's the only purpose that it serves. And on the bottom of this thing, I also have 2 screws attached as well. I have it plugged in at all times, so when I turn the unit on, everything turns on. I almost couldn't fit this after I bought the spindle sander, but it just worked out enough. I have nothing too fancy. I just used a piece of cutoff here and attached it to the side as sort of a front brace. And then the back, I created a couple of L braces. And so the fan actually sits right on these. I actually put this on recently because I noticed that if the fan sat here, sometimes it would tilt, like at this angle, even though it was a tight fit, which was weird. So I put this strip in, which is as thick as this 2x4, about 3/4 inches, and attached it down. So now when I drop the fan in here, it sits a little bit more vertically. So let me put everything back together and turn it on and show you how it works. So I'm just gonna flip this on real quick so you can get a non-scientific eyeball look at how well the suction works on this thing. So you wanna watch the hose. If the hose constricts, that's a good sign of suction. And also if you can watch the lid on the bucket, if the lid kind of sucks down a bit, that's also a sign of a good seal and suction. So let me flip it on real quick for you. So it looks to be pretty good. I don't see any problems with seal. So from the inlet through the hose, there's no leak in the hose. The attachment to the bucket is solid. The lid sits solid. The elbow bracket of PVC is solid, and there's no leak from the PVC to the duct tape. So not bad. So now to the suck test. Okay, so here goes the world's most unscientific test ever. I have a little bit of dust I swept up, a leaf. I have a piece of styrofoam kicking around, and I have 5 rocks that I just picked up from outside. And I'm going to see how well this thing sucks up each one of these things, starting at about, 6 inches high and working on down and going through the line. So let's see how it goes. So now it's time for the sound test. I am going to measure how loud this Shop Vac is, both open and contained, at 2 different distances. So I'm going to test it open and closed both at about 1 foot away, less than a foot away from the Shop Vac itself, and then I will measure both open and closed about 8 feet away. And I'm going to use an app. This is an app made by NIOSH, which some of you OSHA folks out there might know what NIOSH is, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and they make this app where you can test in decibels how loud something is, a sound level meter. As you can see, as I'm talking right now, I'm quieter, a little bit louder. It does a pretty good job of testing. For any of you dorks out there that are going to question the scientific accuracy of this app, let me just say that NIOSH makes perfectly clear there's no app that's been created that can test with scientific rigor good enough the actual decibels. So this is just an estimate, but I think that will be good enough for me, and this really is just for sake of comparison. So I'm curious to see how well this thing actually performs as a sound dampening mobile dust collection cart. So let's get to it. Okay, so first test, I've taken the Shop Vac out, and I'm gonna hold the app less than a foot away from the Shop Vac and see what reading I get. All right, I realized you could not see the screen very well on the app when I did the first test, so hopefully I can try and make it more clear this time around. We are about 8 feet away from the Shop Vac, so I'll do test number 2 at 8 feet. All right, now for the enclosed tests, I put the Shop Vac up and shut the door, and I will take a reading about 1 foot away, about this far, with the door closed. All right, here's the last test. We're going to measure closed at about 8 feet. So here are my results, nicely summarized on this scrap piece of paper. When it was open, a foot away, it registered about 98 decibels, so pretty loud. When it was 8 feet away, it registered 84. still kind of loud. Enclosed, it did better, but not as good as I thought it would be. It's hard to kind of tell when you're not in person, but I really feel it's much quieter enclosed than it is opened. But at least as far as the measurements I took, it was about 20 decibels quieter when it was enclosed from a foot away, and then less than 10 decibels quieter 8 feet away. So there was a big drop off between 1 foot and 8 foot when it was open, but not nearly as much of a drop off when it was enclosed. Not really sure why that is, but the important part is what these numbers mean. Even as a hobbyist, you are encountering a shit ton of noise all day and you don't even notice it. When you're working with these tools, something's on, collecting dust, a fan, a tool, something. And constant exposure to that can be problematic. So here is some information from NIOSH and the CDC that explains what acceptable and unacceptable levels are of sound. So 60 decibels, that's a normal conversation, that's fine. You can be exposed to that pretty much all day. 70 decibels, that's about a washing machine or dishwasher, again, that's fine. When it gets to 80 or 85, depending on severity, that's where it can get into some problems. That's about a gas mower or a leaf blower. So if you're mowing the yard or using a leaf blower, that's actually not good for you. At 80 to 85 miles per hour, hearing loss can occur with about 2 hours of use. So if you're mowing a big acreage of grass and you don't have hearing protection, if you're at it for about 2 hours, that can cause hearing loss, and that loss might not be reversible. So 95, that's even worse. That's about a motorcycle. At 95 decibels, hearing loss can occur in about 50 minutes, so less than an hour. So if the Shop Vac is open and you're using it to collect dust and you have it going on for about an hour, that's where hearing loss can start to occur. And then 100, which is about what we got to here when it was open. So if you're standing right next to it at 100, hearing loss can occur within 15 minutes. And this is about as loud as a train or a car horn or a super loud sporting event. And you guys know how loud those things can be. So aside from just doing a little test to see how well this performed, this is illuminating because both of these levels, enclosed at 1 foot and 8 feet away, are within the acceptable level. So if I'm using this dust collection cart a lot, if it's always on, I don't know if I would run to the hearing protection, but I might just to be safe. If you don't know how loud things are that you're using, download the NIOSH app, NIOSH, again, National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. It's not super scientific, but it's pretty good as far as these things go, and it gives you an idea of how loud the things are you're working with. And if you tool around on their website, they will show you a chart and other information about just how loud things can be and how quickly hearing loss can occur when you're around those things. So thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it, and let me know if you have any questions.